We're here at IAV 2020 and I'm speaking to Michael Sprang, Project Director, JLTV. Mike, JLTV, I understand you became Project Director in June of 2019, but your track record, your history with JLTV goes back a little bit further than that?
It does. In 2012, I joined the program office and the role of a product director during the engineering, manufacturing, development phase. So when we had competition going on for the prototyping, actually I was the product director that was working with Oshkosh on their solution. And in 2014, I was selected to be the deputy for the program office. And then in 2019, I was selected to be the program manager for the joint program office. So the requirements for JLTV, at least from the U.S. Army perspective, have remained very constant. So the Army plans to procure about 49,099 JLTVs. The Marine Corps numbers have actually increased over the years, and now they're up to about 16,000 vehicles themselves. The other services that are not necessarily part of the Joint Program Office, but are buying the JLTV include the Navy and the Air Force. The Air Force is buying approximately 2,000, depending upon their funding profile, and the Navy is roughly 400 vehicles at this stage.
And as we stand right now, January 2020, with the contracts that are in place at the moment, how many can be ordered and how many have been ordered?
So in 2015, we awarded a production contract to Oshkosh Defense. That contract period of performance was for approximately 8 years that we could order JLTVs. It had a headspace comment or limit of about 16,901. So we've ordered roughly around 14,000 JLTVs at this point for the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, and a couple FMS partners. At this point, we're looking for what is that next step in our contract, and that's a good news story for us. Competition has been part of the program since the inception of the program. We bought the technical data package from Oshkosh 2016, and so we're looking right now for how do we execute that contract, understanding our period of performance, understanding our headspace within this contract so that we can effectively and continuously produce JLTV and also field the JLTV out there.
So to the layman, I'm guessing that means when the current contract ends, should the Army choose to, it could recompete JLTV and the follow-on contract could in fact be placed with somebody other than Oshkosh?
That is true. So competition has always been part of our strategy, even before we awarded the contract to Oshkosh. And we intend to compete this contract after fulfilling this period of performance. Now, the exact timing of when we're going to run that competition and how we're going to execute that is being coordinated right now and finalized within the Army. We are planning to run the competition, a full and open competition, for those additional quantities above that approximately 17,000 vehicles.
Looking at JLTV as it is today, I understand there are 4 variants in production. Are there any others in the pipeline? For example, we've seen an ambulance variant promoted, we've seen a command and control variant promoted, and I do believe JLTV was touted for the light reconnaissance vehicle requirement.
So it is currently, the Army has not moved forward with the light reconnaissance vehicle requirement per se, but there are no additional variants that the Army or the Marine Corps have identified and validated beyond those 4 different models that you laid out. So we've got the 2-door, the utility, and then we've got 3 4-door vehicles, the general purpose vehicle, the heavy guns carrier, and the close combat weapons carrier. Now, I would say that JLTV has been designed with growth capability built into it. So as the Army and as the Marine Corps look at other capabilities that they want to add in the light formations, the JLTV becomes a platform that has that capacity to grow.
And looking at the vehicle beside us, I can see that it is an example of a modified JLTV, and it was quite well reported that when it was delivered to the troops, a number of faults were identified. Windows too small, perhaps it made a little bit too much noise and stuff like that. Now, JLTV had a fairly rigorous development and test schedule. So one has to ask, how can it go through such a rigorous and prolonged test schedule And when it's delivered to the soldier, such a fundamental issue as the windows are too small suddenly pops up.
Well, actually, I think it's a verification of the actual test process that we found those items out. It wasn't after we fielded the vehicle, it was during the operational test, which is a formal test program, part of the development cycle for the JLTV. So during the developmental testing, which is primarily using test center drivers to evaluate the performance of the capability of the vehicle, we also factor in an operational test where you bring in Marines, you bring in Army soldiers from active units to run different mission profiles to execute approximately 60,000 kilometers of testing during that period of time. And during there, the idea that there was a few items that they wanted us to look at improving is actually part of the development cycle within the Army acquisition. And so the fact that we found some things is not a bad thing. The good thing is that the Army committed to understanding what those issues were and then committing to finding resolution for them. And so we developed a couple different solutions, one of them being situational awareness. And so we added a forward-facing camera on the front of the vehicle. And this capability is we leveraged the automotive industry. So a lot of cars today have cameras all over the vehicles, and so that's a fairly low-cost solution that was added. It integrates into our driver smart display unit. It brings that forward ability of seeing from 23 feet to 14 inches in front of the vehicle. And so not only adding that capability of seeing in front of the vehicle at a longer distance when you're driving faster, but when you're driving at a slow speed trying to avoid obstacles. And so it was a very low-cost idea to bring in that capability. In addition, the windows themselves were originally designed to mirror an MRAP solution, so a solution that had already been fielded in about 14,000 vehicles. Ultimately, what they decided, the soldiers, when they looked at it, was because of how it was oriented within the vehicle, it was that trade-off between weight, because transparent armor is heavy, and the actual performance of visibility. We took a look at the final solution, and we could accept a little bit higher weight penalty by increasing the size of the glass. And so it was the operational test allowed us to understand how the soldier is going to use the vehicle and then make those changes. It was a good news story from our perspective.
And will those modifications be retrofitted to the JLTVs that have previously been delivered?
They will. So we've already cut them into production. So every vehicle that we're making today has those capabilities, including the muffler, which I didn't mention. And then we'll be taking those solutions and we will be adding them back into the fielded vehicles. In addition, we're trying to implement those changes prior to fielding so that as they get handed off, they already have them in there. For example, the first unit that will be receiving them is getting them right now. And then we'll be going back as soon as we get that additional capability and production capacity on those items, we'll go back and retrofit those vehicles.
And if I understand correctly, the current JLTV production standard is A1. How many A0s were produced, and what is the difference between an A0 and an A1?
Okay, so there was roughly 1,800 A0s produced, and the A1 is the current model. The vehicles themselves, as far as capability, are equal. And so the only thing that changed was GM Defense, or GM, I'm sorry, not GM Defense, who manufactures the engine. They were going through their model change. So that engine is designed for their commercial marketplace. And their GM Silverados, their Sierra, their heavy pickup trucks. So the actual use of that engine in our vehicle is a low quantity compared to what they get in the commercial marketplace. They made the decision to change that engine. And so Oshkosh then updated the vehicle to the A1 configuration to provide that same performance, but with the engine that was available commercially at that point. So there are differences as it relates to components, but the performance is equal.
And a final question, cost. JLTV has often been promoted as must cost less than $250,000 without the add-on protection kit. Is that every variant, and did it meet that cost ceiling?
Yeah, so the $250,000 was at a base year 2011 dollar figure. So anytime you see number in the print today, you really have to look at the inflation also that has happened from that point. And that is with the base armor configuration, so the A-kit as we call it, So every JLTV does come with armor protection, even meeting that threshold cost. And so we did meet that cost. Actually, we came in well below that cost threshold. And it's an average cost of those 4 different models that we previously talked about, based upon the quantities of those models that the Army and the Marine Corps plan to buy. We are today building the A1 or the A configuration for the Army. That's how we order most of our vehicles. The Marine Corps orders them with a B kit, so the additional armor protection on that vehicle. The Army buys more kits that can add it to it at a later date. The armor itself costs about $60,000, which I think is kind of getting after your question, but the manufacturing, the base truck itself, absolutely met its cost thresholds, and we are very proud of that response. In addition, we've met our program cost estimates and actually been recognized with OSD, the Office of Secretary of Defense for the U.S. government for cost savings under our should cost award a couple years ago because we have come in so far below our estimates.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time, Mike.